Hey viewers, Fernando from SkyFi Audio. Today I thought I'd give you a glimpse at what we call the wall of Macintosh. It's no secret that Macintosh is one of the most recognizable and best-selling brands in the world in terms of audio equipment. So it's not a coincidence that we accumulate over time a really large assortment of Macintosh equipment, all the way ranging back to the 60s through today. This market here in the tri-state area was well served by dealers that were selling Macintosh throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So it makes sense that we, as we buy used equipment, would end up with quite an assortment of it. So I'm going to give you a quick glimpse. I'm going to sort of go over the different eras for you and what sort of pieces we like to accumulate, because I know there are a lot of Macintosh fans out there. So I thought I'd just go over what our inventory looks like today in April of 2021. So we lay out our racks in a specific order. We like to lay out all the tube equipment of the amplifiers at the lower shelf here because they don't stack very well. So the top shelf here is reserved for tube amplifiers. You'll see an assortment from 60s through today. Now, all the equipment that you see in these views has been mostly restored or reconditioned. We have another area where we keep the stuff that is in progress. But for example, let me give you a glimpse here at a Macintosh 240. This is a 40-watt amplifier in its original form, and it's undergone a full restoration. As you can see, there's a new chassis. The chrome is intact and transformers have been painted. So what we do when we get these pieces is we sort of ascertain what kind of restoration they need to go through in order to go to market. Some of them, if they're in good cosmetic shape, we will just essentially open them up and replace all the components that we know are likely to fail or have a negative impact on the sound quality. So we'll replace capacitors, potentiometers, diodes, and all the devices inside that are likely to fail or create a catastrophic failure. But we would do it mindfully so that we maintain the original quality sound characteristic of a Macintosh amplifier, which is what people really want. They want vintage, but they want vintage reliable. And those things don't really go hand in hand. But we sort of get them to that point. So we replace quite a few components on them, sometimes close to all of them, but we always keep the transformers, which is a key to the quality of the sound characteristic of a Macintosh amplifier. So the amplifiers are these black cans that you see right here. The output tubes are the largest tubes, and then the early stage, the preamp stages, are right here, the smaller tubes in the front. And then the transformers are divided into input and output transformers. So the AC voltage will go through the input transformer. And then the last stage, when the signal leaves the tubes, will go through the output transformers, which is part of the magic of a Macintosh amplifier. So those always stay in place, and they're pretty hardy, so they almost never have issues. So we often go as far as replacing the chassis as well. Unfortunately, early amplifiers from Macintosh were steel chassis that were chrome plated, and if they were kept like in an environment where there was any moisture in the air, they would rust over time or pit. So it's not uncommon for us, for example, on this pair right here of MC30s, 30-watt Macintosh amplifiers, to receive a brand new sort of reproduction chassis. That way they leave here looking absolutely brand new. So we will painstakingly remove the transformers, all the sockets, all the internals, and transfer them over to a new chassis and make them look, close to new. And again, while retaining the signature, the sound signature of the original amplifier. On this particular amp here, you can see this capacitor here, for example. It's a multi-stage capacitor. we'll replace it with a modern equivalent that still looks vintage. So rather than stick a modern plastic covered capacitor, we source these great cans that are been modernized but maintain the original look of the amplifier. And we do that on a lot of the pieces that we restore. So let me see if I can give you a glimpse of different amplifiers. This one, for example, is a pair of Mc60 Monoblocks. These have been restored internally, but externally we kept them original because the chassis were in pretty good shape. You can see they've got some vintage RCA tubes, for example, in original form. You can see some of the pitting there towards the bottom of the chassis. This one right here is it's a 75. It's a Macintosh 75, so it's a 75 watt monoblock. Its sibling must be somewhere around here. I don't see it immediately, but yeah, here it is. So there's a pair of MC75s, very desirable. These were reissued not that long ago, I think in maybe around 2015 or so. They reissued the MC75, and now it's been discontinued again. So this is the original and very desirable version of it in monoblock form. You can see in the front, it's got a single gain control, a single input, and captive power cord, and the terminal strip for the speakers. This piece right here is somewhat modern. This is a Macintosh 275, so as it follows Macintosh standard naming convention, where it's specifying the number of channels and the power. It's 2 channels at 75 watts. This is a CE edition, commemorative edition, right around the same time as the Gordon Gow edition. You can see it's got modernized XLR connectors with a vintage throwback. It's got a captive power cord and somewhat vintage looking terminals that have been updated to a gold finish. So a very collectible piece, kind of bridging the gap between vintage and modern. And the 275 is still being made today. It's in its 6th iteration and available from Macintosh. This one here is a 240 that was sort of retro modernized. It's got a screen on it, a view meter. It's got modern carbon fiber connectors. The transformers were powder coated, kind of like an attempt to modernize or do a sort of resto mod to an MC240. Moving on this way, I already showed you the 30s. These are wonderful amplifiers, monoblocks, 30 watts per channel. These are using all tungsten tubes and brand new chassis. Here's the 240 that I mentioned earlier that has also been through a full restoration. Looks like it has a brand new chassis and new tubes as well. And then let's see, over here, sitting on top of our JBLs, we've got another set of 30s that have just finished. We just finished this restoration. We painted the transformers, applied brand new chassis. You can see that the logo's still missing. We're buffing and polishing the logo before we put them back on the amplifier. These are being tested, long-term testing. We've already done the bench testing, and now they're being sort of tested against our flagship JBL 4343 speakers, which is a great match. I'll do a separate video on those beauties. And down below, some of the older, sort of a mix of older equipment, not necessarily Macintosh, but we've got some drivers, Quicksilvers, Dynacos, etc. So back to the racks. On this corner here, we've got a trio, a perfect combination. This was an MR78, a C27, and the amplifier is going to be a 2125. These are from an original home, all in oak cabinets or walnut cabinets, an amazing survivor condition. You can see these online on our website, SkyFiaudio.com. All right, so then back to the rack. Down there we've got let's see. Here's some preamps. We've got a MX112, which is a combination preamp tuner in a beautiful case. C31V, this is one of the earlier remote control preamps with an equalizer, which people always look for in Macintosh gear. Absolutely love equalizer, especially with vintage speakers. It's nice to have the ability to get a little bit extra out of the vintage speakers, whether it's a little bit more bass or a little bit more treble. Vintage preamps from Macintosh will often have equalizers on them, which is great. Even on this MX117, which is a little earlier, you can see a 3-band equalizer. And then a plethora of tuners. Let's keep going down this road here. MX121, a couple of video processors. People are actually still buying these processors because they just love the look and sound of Macintosh. There's a 5-channel amp down there. There's a 6-channel or an 8-channel MC60 Monoblocks. An MA6900 integrated amplifier. That's also not very old. That's a great one, single unit solution. A C38, that's a great analog preamp with balanced ins and outs. An MX130 below it. And up here we've got some tuners. We've got an MR77, which is an old tube, very, very well performing tuner, one of the more desirables from Macintosh, the MR77. And then an MR80 right next to it, which is a sort of digital version of the MR78. And by digital, I mean it's still an analog tuner, but they've given you some facilities for presets and things like that, and a digital readout. Here's a 4-piece system. These are also meant to go together. As a matter of fact, I think we've got them listed online all together as a set of 4. The MC7200, the C37, the MR7083, and the MCD 7007 CD player. So now we're looking at the mid to late 80s. A slightly different look. You can see they went to a more architectural finish on the end caps and a 2-tone aluminum with glass. Earlier Macintosh gear would have had glass everywhere, and at this particular period in time they went to a brushed aluminum with glass on top. As you can see, they did the same treatment on the preamp, tuner, and compact disc player. Anyway, great stack as well here from a single home. All right, working our way. I see an MC2250 down there, a little bit earlier as well, with no meters, but in super condition. Here's a MI3, a tuner performance indicator. This one unfortunately has broken glass, and we haven't been able to source our replacement glass. And it's worth mentioning, one of the reasons we love Macintosh is really their accessibility to parts. They're an amazing company at supplying their client base with whatever they need, even from really old pieces. We're able to still get glass for just about every piece that Macintosh makes, with a few exceptions. And we're able to get schematics, IC chips, knobs, end caps, just about everything we need. And they're quick to ship and very reasonable. They don't take advantage of their client base like other brands do. Even a broken glass, which is a common failure on a Macintosh piece because of the fact that it is in fact glass, is very reasonably priced and not too difficult to change out. So here we've got a bunch of preamps, a C24, which is solid state preamp, and a C28 just below it. This one is a common piece that we restore fully. We source just about every part and power supply we need to, and we're able to do really nice restorations on the C28. It's probably our best-selling vintage preamp from Macintosh. One of the nice features, it has bass controls and treble controls independently for left and right channel, which is unusual. Very good sounding preamp once we get through it and redo the power supplies. C26, just below the 28, is also a great candidate for restoration. Above it is a C36, which is more modern. You can see we're back to this aluminum lower section and the glass up top. Moving to the right, we've got some of the early amplifiers at 2105. So this would be 2 channels at 100 watts or 105 watts per channel. Earlier design language, you can see the end caps have a slight angle to them, where, you know, from 60s and 70s, where in the 80s they went to, as I mentioned, a more architectural square end caps. But one of the nice things about Macintosh, as you can see, is that you can actually mix and match different eras, and the stuff looks good together. You can take a preamp from today and match it to a tuner from 30 years ago, and it kind of still looks cool, and it all goes well together. Up above is an MA230. This is one of my favorite pieces that they make. It's an old tube integrated amplifier. There weren't a lot of them in this configuration, so as you can see, this one's in beautiful condition. Impeccable glass and aluminum with all the writing on it. Part of the reason Macintosh used glass on a lot of their features, or a lot of their pieces, was to keep the lettering intact throughout the years. You'll find that in Marantz and audio research that the writing itself would give up over time just from being touched too many times. Whether it was stenciled or etched, it was a common occurrence to have the writing sort of fade away over time, but since Macintosh put the writing behind the glass, it would stay protected for its entire lifespan. All right, above it we've got also a great selling piece from this era. It's an MX110. It's a tuner preamp. These we also do full restorations on. We absolutely go to town on them and get them super reliable and nice and quiet. Great analog old tube tuner and preamp in one box. This is an MX110 Z series, which is the more desirable one, a little bit later production date. An absolute beautiful unit. Moving on, an MR77. I think we've seen this before. Again, an old tube tuner in a case. Here's another MX110 that's been fully restored. Here's another MX110 and another one that has not been restored just yet. It looks like it's still waiting for a cosmetic restoration. Let's see, around the corner we've got a couple of gems worth looking at. Down there is one of the more powerful amplifiers they made. This is an MC2500 in black trim. Beautiful amp, big blue meters, power guard, rack handles. This is almost a pro level amplifier. It wouldn't have been uncommon to see this touring with a band or in a stage somewhere. Super well built, reliable amplifiers. As you can see, the casework was made to travel and get beat up. They eliminated all the glass faceplates, obviously, to make it a little hardier. Above it is a Ma6500 Integrated. Great performing, all analog integrated, and a 7106 6-channel amp just above it. And in the back, you kind of see some of the pieces awaiting restoration. Here's a MC60, almost barn find, complete trashed chassis. These tubes probably have seen better days as well, but a great candidate. The transformers will still be good, and a lot of the internals will get rescued. A 225, 2 channels at 25 watts. Very desirable in the vintage world. Another 240, a little bit rusted. This is an early mono amp from the 50s, I believe. And let's see, there's a solid state amplifier, and I think that covers it. Let me go back to the JBLs. I think we have a couple more pieces there. So here are the 30-watt amps that we talked about before. And here's a great example of what I meant before. This is a brand new current generation C22 reissue. And look how good it looks next to an MR71 from the late 60s, early 70s, and MC275 that's also modern. You can kind of get a sense that how easy it is to max them cosmetically throughout the generations and why they're great collector pieces. All right. Well, that covers our, oh, wait, one more thing here. Here's the best of the best, and C22, a fully restored C22. This piece just sold to a gentleman in Poland, so that'll get shipped out and go to its new home in Europe. And above it is an MC240, completely restored and mint. So this particular set would have been sold together back, 40, 50 years ago. If you were lucky enough to have a set, they're still very valuable, especially in the restored form. So that's it. Our wall of Macintosh. You will see a few things up top that aren't. We've got a few pieces up there. I've got a Luxman, some Marantz. There's a Marantz 7 that's been restored in a wood cabinet. Audio Research SP3s, wonderful vintage preamp from Audio Research. That would have been a competitor to the C22, for example. And then above it, you'll see a big stack of Sakara FM tuners and a few reel-to-reels. I see a Crown and a few others. And then some new old stock. Marantz 8B amplifier new in the box. There's a C28 new in the box, and some little treasures that we've accumulated over time in original packaging. All right, so that's it. Our wall of sound at SkyFi Audio. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you want any more specifics on any of the pieces. Provide any comments below. Let me know what I got wrong. I'm sure there's a lot of experts out there that have caught different errors I've made in this narration. But please visit our website, skyfiaudio.com, and subscribe to our channel. That'll keep us motivated to bringing you these videos. Thanks, viewers.